Hello guys, this is the video for 5B.5 Systems of Inequalities. It is just going to be a really quick one. This shouldn't take you very long to follow along with, but make sure you understand it because it will be on the quiz, all right? So the first lesson, the 5B.4 that we did, we learned how to how to take a system of inequalities like this one and graph it on a graph, one graph together, a coordinate plane, and we shaded them and we found where those colors crossed, and then that's how we knew where the solution was. In 5B.5, what we're doing is we're being given the graph and we have to come up with the system of inequality, linear inequalities. So we're going to learn how to take this and write a system. So I'm going to zoom out a little so we can always see the graph. So hopefully this doesn't get too small for you to follow along with. Okay, so we're going to write a system of inequalities that match the system shown below. So this is a system here, and we're going to use what we know about our graph to write some inequalities. So there's more steps to follow. The first one is we're going to find the equation for the boundary lines. Now remember, the boundary lines are either this solid line here on line A or this dashed line on line B, okay? In Unit 2, back first quarter in linear and exponential functions, we learned several different ways to write an equation from a line. The easiest for us in this case is going to be to create a slope-intercept line, and by now you guys should be so sick of these, but if you're not, if you still don't know what that is, that's the one that looks like this. Y equals mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. Okay, make sure you're writing this down. Okay, so let's take line A for example. Line A is this one right here. Okay, it's a solid one. So we always start with y equals, because that's how we have here. So you're always going to start with y equals. Now, the first thing we need to find is our slope. We need to find m, and that's our slope. Now, the best way to find slope is to just pick two lines that are really easy to see the points with. So like this one right here and this one right here on the line. And just find out how you got from one to the other. Now remember, you always read a graph from left to right. So we're going to start with the most left point we picked and go to the right. Also keep in mind that slope is rise over run always. So we're going to count how many we go up or down first, and then how many we go right. So in this case, since I'm going from this point to this point, I should use a different color, so that it's easy to see. Let's use pink. Maybe that'll be easier. So from this point to this point right here. So to get from here to here, I'm going to go up one. Okay, so that's going to be one on top. And then from this, I'm going over 2. So then 2 goes on the bottom. So up 1 over 2. So it's 1/2. And then you always put an x next to it because that's my slope. That's how I know which one is my slope. It's the one with the x. Okay. Then I need to see, where does this line A cross this y-axis at? Now the y-axis is the one that runs up and down. It crosses it right here. And if you look, that number is -1. So instead of writing plus a -1, we're just going to write -1. Okay? So that's A. We're done with A so far. So now let's do B. B is the dashed line. So we start with y equals, always. And let's use purple for this one so that we don't get confused. Now this point right here is a super easy one to see. And this point right here seems to be pretty easy to see. Okay? So I'm going to count how many I go up, always from left to right. So this point, we start with this point first. So we're going to go up 1, up 2. So my slope is going to have a 2 on top. And then we went from here to here. So we only went over 1. So then we write 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. Now we don't technically have to write up 2 over, we don't have, because it's a 1 under, we could just write a 2. But it's not a big deal. We'll keep it 2 over 1 for now. Now, if you picked some other point, let's say, for example, you picked this point here and this point right here, and you went up 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 2. So you were like this. Make sure you simplify your fractions at least. Okay, this would simplify to 2 over 1. Okay, so even if you don't get rid of the 1 underneath, please make sure you're at least getting them in their simplest form before you write this, okay? So then we write an x next to that because it's our slope. And then we need to find the y-intercept. Again, this is my y-axis right here. So it intercepts right here at -4. So we're going to write -4. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2, we need to determine what inequality sign should replace the equal sign in these equations that we just wrote up here. Okay, so here's some things that you need to remember. A dotted line uses either less than or greater than, and a solid line uses less than and equal to or greater than and equal to. Remember, the solid line has that line underneath it. Okay, the other thing we need to know is that if they're shading below our line, then we're going to use either less than or equal to. And if they're shading above our line, we're going to use greater than or equal to. So this is what I would write. I should have made a spot for this, but write this down because this is super important and it makes life easier for you. If you have a dotted line and it's shaded below, it's going to be less than. If you have a dotted line and it's shaded above, it will be greater than. If you have a solid line with below shading, it's going to be less than or equal to. And if you have a solid line with above shading, it will be greater than or equal to. That should make life a little easier for you when we do these over here. Okay? So now what we need to do is we need to take our equations that we wrote in step 1 and we need to change those to inequalities by switching out the equal sign with one of these that we just wrote. Okay, so this first one, A, looking up here at this line right here, we can see that it's solid, first of all, and the shading is below the line. So we have solid and below. So if we look over here at these notes we just took, we'll see that a solid below line needs to have less than or equal to. So this right here is going to be replaced. It's going to be y is now less than or equal to 1/2 x minus 1. All I did was switch this equal sign with an inequality sign. That's all I did. Okay, so now let's look at line B. You'll see that line B has dotted. And it is, sorry, I can't keep the graph and my writing in the screen. But if you look, it's shaded above. So it's dotted and above. Okay, so over here, dotted and above tells me I'm going to replace it with greater than. So right here, this equal sign is going to be replaced with greater than, and that's all we're doing. So y is now greater than 2 over 1x minus 4. Okay, the last step, the super hard step, is draw a big S bracket and write the inequalities inside. Yes, I know that's really difficult. Some of you have a hard time writing the S bracket. I know, I had a hard time too. So maybe it is the most difficult step, but really it shouldn't be. So you just write a big S bracket, and then you take these two and write them inside of it. So you've got y is less than or equal to 1/2 x minus 1, and y is greater than 2 over 1x minus 4. Ta-da! Done. That is it. That's the notes for this lesson, you guys. Okay, but here, I know that when you flip it over, there is this. We will do this together before we do the quiz next class period. Yes, next class period is a quiz. Okay, now what I do want to explain to you, though, is the assignment that you're going to be doing. Now, you can do this with a partner. I have no problem with that. But make sure you're working, please, and getting your work done. Okay, this is a whodunit. So up around the classroom, you will see clues. There are 10 of them. That's why there's 10 boxes. 6 on the front, 4 more on the back with this stuff down at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to grab one really quick. Okay, this is clue number 1. Okay, this is what clue number 1 looks like. I'm going to zoom out a little so you can see. So you'll find this one up around the classroom. So it says, what system of linear inequalities is shown in the graph? So just like we just learned how to do, you're going to figure out, really, people, really. Oh, that's not even the right one. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to figure out which of these systems matches this graph right here. Okay, once you figure that out, there's a clue next to it. So let's say, for example, it was that one that was just marked, even though it's not. Okay, this one says the victim was not mauled by a cougar. So this is basically giving you a clue as to what did not happen. So what you're doing is you're trying to figure out who did the murder. Okay, so over here on the back side, you've got teachers, last known whereabouts, and their method. So if the answer to this one was that the victim was not mauled by a cougar, you would come over here and mark off not mauled by a cougar. Okay. When you're done with all 10, you should have one teacher left, one whereabout left, and one method left. If you don't, you've done something wrong. Okay. Let's say, for example, that this one was Mr. Showalter was practicing his butterfly in the pool. Okay, if that's the case, this one gives you 2 answers. So you would come over here and you would work off Mr. Showalter and you would mark off the pool. Because that's basically his alibi. Mr. Showalter was in the pool, so you know he didn't do the murder or whatever, okay? When you're done, like I said, you'll have one of each left. You write them in here, and that'll tell me if you got them right or wrong. Now, the sub has the answers to what each of these are. So if you feel like you're stuck and you want them to check it, that's great. I have no problem with that. But when you're going around to all of these, make sure you write down what the answer was as far as the clue goes, because that's how the answers are that I've given them. And what they'll do is they'll say, okay, this number 1, you put the victim was not mauled by a cougar, so you could just write mauled by cougar here. But then when you walked up to the teacher, they would see that that one was wrong, and they'd say, okay, this one's wrong. Go back and check it. That's why you're not coming up with one of each of these. Okay? I hope that makes sense. It should. Try your hardest to answer these. I know some of them are a little tricky, especially number 4 is tricky, so try your best. With number, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7. With number 7, you're gonna have to divide by 2, and it's a fraction. So instead of dividing by 2, make sure you're multiplying by 1/2. Okay, that's your clue for that one. And then just try your best. And like I said, have the sub check it if you're not sure what's going on. Okay, this needs to be turned in before you leave. It cannot be done at home. It is an in-class only thing, and it needs to be done. You should have plenty of time after watching this video. If you got on top of this video and did it as quickly as you should have plenty of time. Okay, guys, I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.